Is anything happening?
There, we're just experiencing some technical difficulties. We'll be right with you.
Okay.
Hello. We good? All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much for your patience as we've been working through a couple of technical difficulties on our end. So just to start the meeting, just to introduce myself, my name is Anya Ledbetter. I'm the manager of elections, print and mail for the city of Hamilton in the office of the city clerk. My team is the team that is responsible for running the municipal election, and we are under the leadership of City Clerk Andrea Holland, who unfortunately could not attend tonight. So she does send her regrets, but rest assured you're in good hands. We do have a couple of things to go through tonight, and I'm so pleased that so many of you were able to join us. Just so that everybody is aware, we are recording this session. We will be providing this session online as a video link, so that if you do wish to go back and view it again, you can absolutely do that. And then in addition, if there are people who were unable to attend tonight, they are more than welcome to watch at a later date. I will just pull up my presentation. Great. Thank you. All right, nothing like technical difficulties to start the day. All right, so I'm sure it's not lost on anybody here that we are getting very close to Election Day. So Election Day for the City of Hamilton, as all municipalities, is on October the 24th of this year. So just a little more than 6 months away. So what you're seeing there is our new branding, which I'm pleased to reveal. So you'll be seeing more and more from the city with this branding on it as well. So thanks to our comms team. As I was saying, a couple things that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to start off by giving everybody here an overview of the 2022 municipal election. So that's going to be my presentation, in addition to a little bit of detail for you all on the City of Hamilton's process and different things to be aware of from the City of Hamilton's perspective. But the bulk of the meeting is really going to be dedicated to our guests from the province. So we've got Diane and Sav from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that are here and going to be providing us with some information from the ministry specifically for candidates. And they may touch on third party as well if any of you are interested in that. And then we're additionally going to have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So just in terms of housekeeping, we are asking that you keep questions to the end of the meeting. And so what we're going to ask, if you do have a question, please feel free to email it to elections@hamilton.ca. Alternately, if you don't have access to that email account, you can raise your hand in the meeting. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a couple of buttons there. One of them enables you with the ability to raise your hand. And then our staff here will monitor and record your name. And then at the end of our session, we will ask you to ask your question at that point. If you are on the phone and calling in, at the end, I will ask anybody on the phone to ask a question if there are any questions from the phone. And for those of you who are watching through YouTube, again, the elections@hamilton.ca is the best place to ask the question. We will monitor the inbox throughout this session, record the questions, and we'll make sure we get to them at the end. If after the meeting you do have additional questions, our team is here, and that inbox is monitored between business hours, 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday, and we're available to answer questions. All right. So just as a reminder, municipal elections, City of Hamilton on October the 24th. Hamilton voters will elect the following offices. So we will be electing 1 mayor, 15 city councilors, 11 English Public School Board trustees, 9 English Camera School Board trustees, 1 French Public School Board trustee, and 1 French separate school board trustee. So those of you who are around for 2018, you'll be pleased to know there were no ward boundary changes this time around. So the ward boundaries remain the same as they did in 2018. In terms of what the Office of the Clerk is responsible for, I just wanted to provide a bit of an overview with regard to what my office and the Office of the City Clerk is responsible for in terms of the election. So from the Municipal Elections Act, it does say that the city clerk is responsible for administering the election, which includes developing policies and procedures that are necessary to conduct an election in a manner that reflects the principles of the Municipal Elections Act and its regulations. So what this means in terms of the principles are that the secrecy and confidentiality of the voting process is paramount, that the election is fair and non-biased, that the election is accessible to all voters, that the integrity of the voting process shall be maintained throughout the election, that there is certainty that the results of the election reflect that votes that are cast, that voters and candidates are treated fairly and consistently, and that the proper majority vote governs by ensuring that valid votes are counted and that invalid votes are rejected so far as is reasonably possible. What we do, so we do uphold those principles, and that's really our guiding principle, our vision, and our values. But what this trickles down to and what this means in practice is that our elections team really plans and delivers the election. We are responsible for the administration. So this includes ensuring alignment with the MEA, the Municipal Elections Act. We maintain the security and the integrity of our voting system. We recommend and administer voting methods. We secure equipment and supplies. This includes ballots. We assess and secure poll locations. We develop policies and procedures to ensure that we're meeting those principles of the Municipal Elections Act. We hire and train staff to staff our polling locations on election day. We're responsible for communication, resource development. We take care of the voters list and voters list in collaboration with MPAC. We certify nominations, so we receive all of the nomination submissions and our city clerk certifies. And then of course, ordering and verifying ballots. It's not an exhaustive list, but just wanted to give you a sense in terms of what my office is in charge of and really what our role is. It truly is around administering the election and ensuring that it meets the principles of the MEA. What I do want to highlight is things that our office does not do. And so, our office and the election staff does not provide interpretation on legislation as it pertains to candidates and third parties. And so it is a recommendation that if there are questions, you're reaching out to the province or you're seeking legal counsel. We do not provide campaign advice or direction. We do not share information on behalf of candidates or third parties. The city does not host debates. We are a neutral party. We do not give advice on finance or expenditures, and we do not contravene the Municipal Elections Act or make exceptions. So now that you get a bit of an understanding of what we do, I do want to share with you some key information for 2022, in addition to a couple of changes that you will notice this time around in the election and the election process. So just in terms of the nomination package, the nomination package is available currently on the city's website. So if you go to hamilton.ca/elections, you'll find all the elections information that the city has at the present time. And this website is going to be continuously updated throughout the election with information and with resources for candidates, for third parties, for eligible voters, and educational resources for the community. But currently on the website, we've got a link to the candidate information, or I want to be a candidate. And part of that includes our nomination package. So in order to submit a nomination to the city, you will need to have the nomination form, which is Form 1. It's also available through the province. The endorsement of nomination form, Form 2. This form is only if you are running for council. It is not required if you are running for school board. Form 3 is the Declaration of Qualification. This is a city form, and this includes, or there is a form specifically for council, and there is one for school boards. We also require a release of candidate information consent form. What this form is requesting is your consent for us to put your information on the website. You should be aware that all the nomination packages are considered to be public documents, so anybody can come to City Hall and view the documents. What we are asking for consent is your consent to put your information on our website. We also have a request and oath for voters list if desired. If you do want a copy of the voters list as a candidate, you do have to request it, and you additionally have to take an oath that indicates that you are aware that it is for election uses only. And then finally, we are asking for a ballot name and name pronunciation form. And we are asking for this form because it will help us as we're setting up our assistive devices for the polls so that names are pronounced correctly. In addition to those forms, you must also have your nomination filing fee. So for candidates running for mayor, that's a $200 fee. For councilors or school board trustee candidates, it's a $100 fee. The fee is refundable upon the submission of your financials. And then in addition, we will require proof of identification in line with the provincial regulations. And again, information is available on our website if you have additional questions. For 2022, so similarly to 2018, nomination packages must be submitted in person. City of Hamilton will not be accepting electronic submissions of nomination packages this year. And that is mostly because, well, there's a couple of reasons for it, but essentially we're requiring original signatures on the endorsement form. So we're asking that you come in person. What is different for 2022 is that we are going to be following an appointment process to file nominations. So in order to file your nomination with the city, we are requesting that you book an appointment if you are going to be submitting your nomination between May 2nd and August 18th. So we have appointments every day from 8:30 to 4:30. To book an appointment, you can email us at elections@hamilton.ca, or alternately, you can call the Office of the City Clerk at 905-546-2424, extension 4408, and we will schedule you into an appointment. The reason we're going with appointments this time around is mostly to make sure that people are separated, that we're not, making that there's not too many people in a room together, and then also to ensure that everybody is afforded the amount of time that is required to go through the nomination form packages in whole. If you are choosing to file your nomination package on nomination day, which is August 19th, 2022, you do not require an appointment. So on this day, we will have all staff on hand to accept your nomination package. We will be accepting them at City Hall between the hours of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. And this is from the Municipal Elections Act. So those hours come right out of the Act. And packages from candidates who arrive after 2 p.m. on nomination day will not be accepted. So if it is your plan to file on nomination day, make sure that you are at City Hall in line to submit your package by 2 p.m. Candidate information is going to be available in a couple of locations. So we do have our website, as I've pointed to it just a little while ago. So that is www.hamilton.ca elections. But what candidates will receive, so upon your submission of nomination, you will be receiving an email with access, information for you to access our candidate portal. All of the information that you will require as a candidate will be available on the candidate portal. So this includes all of our policies and procedures. They will also be on the website, but they will be on the candidate portal. You will receive ward maps on the candidate portal. The voters list will be released on the candidate portal. So we're doing our best to go paperless for this election. So most of the information is going to be electronic and you're going to find it there. If you do require accommodation, we do ask that you contact the elections office at elections@hamilton.ca and we can discuss alternatives. So as I said, the candidate portal is going to be your primary source of information. So once you do submit your nomination and we've signed it and you're ready to go, you will receive access. That's where you're going to find all of your information. And again, we're going paperless. I do want to point out, for those of you who may not be aware, that we have updated our election signs bylaw for 2022. So there have been a couple of changes that were made to the election signs bylaw, mostly points of clarification and some modernizations that were made. So the bylaw was updated in February. What we did was we removed the broader bylaw from the sign bylaw. So it now exists as an individual schedule. That information will be available through the candidate portal and also through our city website. We've aligned the bylaw with the Municipal Elections Act pertaining to third-party sign requirements. We clarified election signs on city property. We've addressed new mediums and we've provided clarifications on where signs can be placed on private property. So the intent was really to provide a lot more clarity for candidates as you are out there putting signs up to support your campaign. So just some key considerations that do come from the election sign bylaw. I would just note that election signs cannot be placed under the bylaw until 28 days before voting. So that means election signs cannot go up until September 26, 2022. Election signs must be removed within 72 hours of 11:59 on election night. So all signs must be removed by October 27th, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. I do want to point out a couple of new things for 2022 in addition to our nomination appointment process. As I mentioned, we are doing our best to provide or to be paperless. So as much as we can, we are going to be providing information electronically to candidates throughout the process. What is additionally new for 2022 is we are moving to e-poll books and electronic strike-off. So you'll notice a change at the polls where traditionally our voters list was paper format. We are now using laptops. So an e-poll book is essentially a laptop. We're going to have an electronic voters list and that voters list will be striked off automatically as voters come in to the polls. And so as a candidate, this is going to be useful for you as well because you will have access on election day and election night to that information through the voters list. So you will see the strike off. So it is going to be a little bit different than previous years. In addition, for 2022, we are also introducing a special vote by mail. And so this is something that is new to the city for this year. Other municipalities have done a vote by mail in the past, but essentially electors will be able to request a vote by mail package from the city, and they can vote by mail. So there will be a window of time in September that people can request a package. They will be mailed out, and then packages will be sent back from electors to the city. And then also new for 2022, we're going to be piloting a Vote Anywhere project. So this is something I'm pretty excited about. A couple of locations, we're going to be having a Vote Anywhere pilot at our post-secondary institutions so that students on campus can vote regardless of which ward they live in. We're additionally looking to put a Vote Anywhere in a couple of additional spots throughout the city. And we will provide more information as those become finalized. If it's successful, we may be looking at this to the future. I do want to raise a couple of things around the COVID considerations and protocols. We will be providing, or we will be following all COVID precautions as set out by public health and the province throughout our election period. So as you know, things change every day, it seems like. And so we are doing our best to plan, for October in terms of the polls and in terms of the PPE that is required based on the provincial guidelines. And we are closely monitoring and following these guidelines, and we'll shift if we need to. We additionally would encourage you to follow the latest health protocols, particularly as you are engaging in your campaign activities. And so I just want to point out, the city has our coronavirus page. The province of Ontario has covid19.ontario.ca, and you can find the latest information and scientific information research there to help guide your activities as you are campaigning. Those are the updates I am going to provide for the city at this point in time. Again, questions can be emailed to elections@hamilton.ca. In addition, we do have our phone. You can certainly call the City of Hamilton during business hours at extension 4088, and we will answer your call and answer the questions that you do have, or at least point you in the right direction. And with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I am going to introduce Diane and Sav. Perfect. All right. So Diane and Sav, as I said, are from the province of Ontario. We're very pleased to have them here with us tonight, and they are going to be sharing a lot of information with you. Again, we're recording. We will be posting on the web. And so if you do wish to review again, the information will be there. So with that, I'll pass it over.
Thank you. So you folks are going to load our presentation? Great, thank you.
I'm trying. Just give me a second.
Okay.
All right, there we go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. That's great. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I appreciate Anya's introduction and all of the information that they have up front. I think some of it we will be reinforcing in our presentation, but let's get started. My name is Diane Ploss, and I'm from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and I am the Municipal Advisor that covers Hamilton. Attending along with me today is Sav Johal. She is also a municipal advisor covering other areas. Today, we're here to present information for candidates, third-party advertisers, and school board trustees pertaining to the 2022 municipal election. I would like to thank the Hamilton Clerk's Office for inviting us and for hosting this candidate and third-party advertiser information session. Also, I would like to congratulate you for taking the interest in your community and the local government. Slide 2, please. Thank you. This slide is a stock slide that we put in most of our presentations, and it's basically meant to say that what we're presenting today is a summary of legislation and should not be fully relied on for legal or official purposes. I want to stress that Sav and I are not lawyers, and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal or other professional advice, like an accountant, when necessary. Additionally, we will certainly not be able to cover every aspect of municipal elections, but hope to provide a better understanding of the process, the legislation, and to improve your comfort level. So before we begin, I want to mention a few things. The ministry has available on its website, and we do have links at the back of our presentation for many of these things we're going to talk about. Candidate guide, voter guide, and third-party advertising guides, as well as a link to the regulation election forms and other resources that are available. One of the things I would like to say is I want you to make sure that the forms you are using are 2022 forms and not 2018. We've heard from some folks that they've downloaded forms and called us with some questions, and we realized that they downloaded these forms very early before we'd actually removed 2018 and put up 2022. So please just double check the forms. If you have any questions on the content in this presentation, you need to call the municipal advisor. For Hamilton, that is me, and my contact information is in the back of the deck. And again, I think Anya made it very clear that there are some things they cannot answer, and those are things that we can help. That we can help with. On some of the slides, I may give a very high-level summary, and others that may contain really challenging content, a lot of detail. So if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, know that the guides that I was talking about are very detailed and provide a lot of information and a lot of examples. Next slide, please. The overview. So you can see by this slide the topics that we will be covering today, and I'm just going to reinforce that if you have questions that come up during the presentation, write them down, or I know Anya talked about opportunities to put them in the email, or at the end we will do a hands up thing. We will not be doing the questions until the end, simply because quite often the questions get answered through our presentation. I am going to ask you to forward the slide, and I'm hoping Sav was able to deal with her mute issue. Maybe not. Sav is having difficulty unmuting. I don't know if you in the WebEx got it? Wonderful. Yes. So Sav, you're oops, yes, that one. You're ready to go.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for that, Diane. And thank you for whichever magician in the background unmuted me. So we are on slide 2. So I'll begin. Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction. As many of you are planning to become council members, you may wish to take a quick scan or an in-depth read of the Municipal Act for more information on the powers and duties that a municipality has. On the second last slide of this deck, there is a link to the relevant pieces of legislation that council would refer to. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the relationship between council and staff. Before we get into the information about campaigning, in the next few slides, we're going to briefly touch on the role of the mayor, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff, and the relationship between all three, which is key for an effective and efficient local government. We encourage you to read the slides in more detail at your own leisure. Next slide, please. Council has many roles, which are listed in this slide, as well as the next, and they're found in the Municipal Act. Some of the roles include maintaining the financial integrity of the municipality, ensuring the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, or determining which services the municipality should provide. Next slide, please. Council also conducts meetings, passes bylaws, and develops policies. It's important to remember that these decisions are made as a collective group, with all members of council, including mayors and deputy mayors, only having one vote, and the affirmative outcome becomes the strategic direction for staff. I mentioned that the Municipal Act sets out the many responsibilities and limitations for council, but your municipality's procedural bylaw also outlines the specific policies that your municipality has adopted when it comes to making decisions at council meetings. So again, that is another document that you may wish to refer to better understand your future role as a councillor. And the procedural bylaw can be found on your municipality's website, or you can reach out to the local clerk's office for that document. Next slide, please. As I previously mentioned, although all decisions must be made as a collective group, there are some differences between the role of the mayor and councillors. The mayor is the figurehead for council. Again, that doesn't mean they can make decisions by themselves, but they do represent the municipality at official functions. They preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively, and they provide leadership to the council. Next slide, please. Mayors also promote the purposes of the municipality and are key figures in public involvement. Next slide, please. The role of staff is set out in Section 227 of the Municipal Act. A key feature of effective and efficient councils is a well-developed understanding of the council-staff relationship and the role each party plays. As we discussed, council provides direction, but staff implements council's decisions, and they do that by establishing administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decisions, undertaking research and providing advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, and carrying out duties as required by legislation or other duties assigned by the municipality. So it's important for you to know that some municipal staff positions, including that of the clerk, the treasurer, the chief building official, and the fire chief, have statutory obligations. It's important that council does not interfere with the statutory obligations of those roles. Next slide, please. The function of the CAO, or the Chief Administrative Officer within the municipality, is similar to the role of a Chief Executive Officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which includes developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operation of the municipality. To help understand the role of the CAO, picture an hourglass. Council is at one end, and municipal staff and department heads are at the other end. The CAO is in the middle, the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass flows through. So if council wants to give direction to a specific staff member, the communication would flow through the middle, through the CAO, to get to the other side. Likewise, if staff or department heads wanted to give information or reports to council, it too would flow through the middle, through the CAO, to council. So it's a very important role. Next slide, please. It's important to understand the roles and responsibilities of an elected official, which is why the next few slides are included in this presentation. However, today's session is focused on campaigning, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to quickly go through the next few slides pertaining to your potential future role as a councillor, but I encourage you to read the slides later in your own time. Also, refer to the Councillor's Guide, which again is linked in the references section at the end of the presentation. So this slide here provides you with a high-level overview of the relationship between council and staff. In general, it's the role of the elected council to represent the community and set the direction and policy for the municipality, and it's the role of staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected, and it's important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so they can serve the public in an effective and efficient manner. Next slide, please. It's important to remember that you were elected by your constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents will have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent all of them all of the time. For many issues, you will have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that will not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on the best interest of the municipality as a whole. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the general processes undertaken when creating policies. Next slide, please. Another important role for a municipal council is to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. Next slide, please. Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislated accountability and transparency framework, which includes rules for the municipality and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency of the municipality is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act and is a priority in maintaining public trust, and councillors are of course accountable to the public as elected officials. This slide outlines the policies that council is required to adopt to support that framework. Next slide, please. Every municipality has a code of conduct that sets out the expectations and standards for councillor conduct. So you may wish to look up the code of conduct for the municipality you are running for and familiarize yourself with the requirements. Next slide, please. Municipalities can have a variety of accountability officers as part of their transparency and accountability framework, including a closed meeting investigator, an auditor general, and an integrity commissioner. An integrity commissioner operates independent of council and reports to council with respect to the application of the code of conduct for members of council and local boards, as well as procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members of council and local boards. Next slide, please. The Ontario Ombudsman also has a role with respect to municipalities. More information about the Ontario Ombudsman can be found on this slide. Next slide, please. Personal privacy and other confidentiality issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councillors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out the rules for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. With that, I'm concluding the portion of the presentation pertaining to council and staff roles, and we're going to be switching gears to election campaigning, starting with the role of a school board trustee. Next slide, please. The Education Act creates 4 different kinds of school boards, which are listed on this slide. School board trustees are members of the school board. They are locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions and/or concerns about their local school. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about their duties and commitments. Next slide, please. The role of a school board trustee is to establish policy direction and participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, the Ministry of Education, and families. It's important to note one major difference between school board trustees and municipal candidates. If a municipal candidate works in a municipality, they cannot run in that municipality without taking a leave of absence, but they can run in any other municipality without taking a leave of absence. So they just can't run in the municipality that they are working in. For a school board trustee candidate, if you are employed in any school board in Ontario and you decide to run, again, for any school board position, you must take a leave of absence, even if you're running in a different school board. Now that being said, all employees of a municipality or school board who wish to run for office should check with their employer for any policies or procedures the municipality may have in place about that situation. Next slide, please. In order to run for office for a municipality, you must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list on this slide shows both voter eligibility as well as eligibility to run and hold office. Next slide, please. This slide also lists the eligibility requirements for a school board trustee to be eligible to run. Again, questions about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. Next slide, please. Third-party advertising refers to advertisements or other materials that support, promote, or oppose a candidate, or support, promote, or oppose a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. The meaning of third party in this context means a person or entity who is not a candidate, but is still an entity advocating for issues related to a municipal election. Third-party advertising is separate from any candidate's campaign and must be done independently from a candidate. A third-party advertisement is an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that promotes, supports, or opposes a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Advertisements include traditional ads as well as materials such as brochures or signs. Activities that do not involve spending money, such as discussions or expressing an opinion about a candidate, are not considered to be third-party advertising. So examples include speaking to friends and neighbors, posting on social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or sending an email to a group or mailing list. So as long as you're not spending money, you don't have to register. Next slide, please. Only the following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration: an individual who is normally a resident in Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, or a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. Groups like associations or clubs that are not incorporated cannot register to do third-party advertising. Next slide, please. The first day for filing nominations is May 1st, 2022. Note that this is a Sunday, so in the City of Hamilton, the clerk's office will begin receiving nominations on Monday, May 2nd, 2022, as was mentioned. The last day and time for filing nominations for the 2022 municipal election is on Friday, August 19th, 2022 by 2 p.m. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, or withdraws their nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made during the campaign. Even if you have not spent any money or raised any funds, even if your campaign was 2 days long before you withdrew, you still have to submit that form. It's very easy though. You just have to click on a box that says, no funding was raised or spent, and then you sign the form and submit it. And Diane will go into more detail about this later in the presentation. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee, but only after they file their financial or auditor statements by the required deadline. In the candidate's guide, the ministry has provided a few different examples showing what happens when candidates change their mind about which office to run for after they filed a nomination paper. So again, I would highly recommend that you read the candidate's guide, as it does go into more detail about each of the requirements for nomination. Next slide, please. Starting on May 1st until the close of business on August 19th, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. Candidates must complete Form 1, the nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. To do so, the clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. Additionally, the nomination form must have original signatures. If you live in a municipality with wards, as long as you are eligible to vote in the municipality as a whole, you can run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you don't live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. So that's one vote you wouldn't be getting. With regard to electronic filing, this was already discussed. The City of Hamilton will not be allowing electronic filing for this election. So as was mentioned, you do have to book an appointment with the clerk's office to submit that paperwork. Next slide, please. Municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on their Form 2 unless the municipality has less than 4,000 electors. If the candidate wishes, they can also provide more than 25 signatures. The requirement for nominators to sign nomination forms does not apply to school board candidates, only municipal election candidates. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. So they must be of voting age and reside in the municipality, etc. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just that ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. However, if the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the documents, they can be held accountable under the penalty section of the Municipal Elections Act. So you may want to let your nominators know that before they sign and just confirm with them that they do meet all the requirements. And again, candidates should remember that they are required to obtain 25 original signatures, even if electronic filing was permitted, and to keep those until the next regular election in 2026. Next slide, please. Occasionally, a candidate does change their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can only run for one office at a time. If you file a second nomination for another office, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If you filed your second nomination in another municipality, you may want to contact the clerk of the first municipality just to let them know out of courtesy. If a candidate decides to run for another office in the same municipality and they've already collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use those endorsement signatures for the other office. If your municipality does not have a ward system and you decide to run for a different office on the same council, just in a different ward, everything from your first campaign can be transferred to the second campaign. But no, sorry, I messed that up. If your municipality does not have a ward system and you decide to run for a different office on the same council, so let's say you were running for mayor and now you decide to run for councillor, everything from your first mayor campaign can be transferred to the second campaign, and only one financial statement needs to be filed. If there is a ward system, then your second nomination is considered a separate campaign and two separate financial statements must be filed. So if you were first running for councillor in Ward 1 and then you decide to run for councillor in Ward 5, you must submit your second nomination would be a separate campaign and you would have to submit two separate financial statements. Next slide, please. Individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertisers. There is no registration fee for third-party advertisers. A third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per the Municipal Elections Act. So that requires a notice of registration to be a registered third party for the election. That notice must be filed in the prescribed form and must include a declaration of qualification signed by the individual or by a representative of the corporation or trade union, as the case may be. Once registered, the third-party advertiser can advertise in support or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in that municipality. So this includes council positions, school trustee positions, or upper tier candidates. Any person or entity can advertise regarding any issue relating to elections in that municipality without registering. To advertise regarding questions on the ballot, that requires registration as a third-party advertiser, or if you wish to accept contributions or spend money, that would require you to register. For a regular election, the registration cannot be filed earlier than the first day for filing nominations and cannot be filed later than the Friday before voting day during the clerk's office hours. Once the clerk certifies the notice of registration, the individual, corporation, or trade union becomes a registered third party for the election. If an individual wants to influence voters in more than one municipality, so for example, if a third-party advertiser wanted to influence the school board trustee election and the way voters in the City of Brampton, City of Mississauga, and Town of Caledon, which is covered by the Peel District School Board, the way they vote, they would have to register in each of the 3 municipalities and conduct their activities as 3 separate campaigns. So in every municipality that you are advertising in, you must register. Again, if you plan on spending money or raising funds. If a municipality believes and has supporting evidence that there has been a contravention of the Municipal Elections Act by the third-party advertiser, they can ask the third-party advertiser to remove their advertisement or discontinue the advertising. Next slide, please. If an individual is registered as a third-party advertiser and then they decide they want to become a candidate and they file a nomination as a candidate, their third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn and their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file that second candidate nomination. But if you are a person working in a corporation or a trade union that is registered as a third-party advertiser, and you personally decide to run and become a candidate, that would not impact the corporation because you are different from the corporation that registered. So for example, if I as an individual registered to become a third-party advertiser, and then I decide I want to run for a counselor position and I file a nomination for the counselor position, my third-party advertising campaign automatically ended. But if I work as an accountant for XYZ company and they register as a third-party advertiser, I can still go and register to become a counselor candidate and nothing happens to XYZ company because even though I work for them, we're 2 separate entities. So they can continue doing their third-party advertising and I can continue doing my counselor candidacy advertising. If this situation was real, I would be very careful to keep myself separate from XYZ company's third-party advertising so I don't get accused of collaborating with them because as I mentioned earlier, third-party advertisers cannot work under the direction of a candidate and vice versa. They must be kept separate. Finances related to a third-party advertising campaign also cannot be transferred to a candidate's campaign. So again, using the example if I first registered as a third-party advertiser and then I decide to run as a counselor candidate, I cannot transfer anything from my third-party campaign to my candidate's campaign. I have to start fresh and they're 2 separate campaigns. Similarly, somebody registered as an individual third-party advertiser or as a candidate cannot hand over their campaign to another person. So for example, if I was registered as an individual third-party advertiser, but I had to leave the country for personal reasons, I can't just assign somebody else to take my place when I'm the one who registered. I would have to close down my campaign. The registration period for third-party advertisers runs until the Friday before voting day, so October 21st, 2022, or the last day the clerk's office is open before voting day in a by-election. Again, as a candidate or third-party advertiser or school board trustee, make sure you are aware of all the dates and deadlines all the way up until December or further so that you can make your appropriate preparations. If you're not sure of these dates, reach out to your local municipal clerk. Next slide, please. Campaign accounts are only required if the candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. If you know for certain that your campaign will not raise funds or you don't plan on spending money because that's just what you've decided, you don't need to open a campaign account. Third-party advertisers generally follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financial reporting as candidates for office. Trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to other third-party advertising campaigns. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources, such as the municipality's logo, municipality's website, printers, etc., for the campaign period. So you want to ensure that you are aware of those rules by, again, reaching out to the municipality to ask for them. Again, please refer to the candidate's guide for examples of what is considered a contribution. Next slide, please. It's important to note that contributions from a candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. So both the candidate and contributor are responsible for ensuring that they are following the rules in the Municipal Elections Act. Please inform your contributors of these rules so they can acknowledge that and determine how much money, or if they even can, contribute to your campaign. Remember, you must issue a receipt for every contribution you receive. The receipt should show who made the contribution, the date it was made, and the value. If the contribution was in goods or services, you must determine the value of the goods or services that were provided and issue a receipt for the full value. You are required to return any contributions that were made or accepted in contravention of the Municipal Elections Act as soon as you learn that it was an ineligible contribution. So you would return it to the person that you received it from. If you cannot return the contribution to that person, you must turn it over to the clerk. More information can be found in the third-party advertiser or candidate's guide. And remember, the clerk will be preparing a separate report in respect of each contributor who appeared to have contravened any of the contribution limits, and they may face penalties under the Municipal Elections Act. So it's important that you inform contributors of their limits so that they don't accidentally over contribute and then are listed on this report. Although both of you and the contributor have the responsibility of knowing their limits. When it comes to a corporation providing a contribution to a third-party advertiser, if one corporation controls the others directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. If the corporation is owned or controlled by the same person or groups of people, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. So for example, if one person owns 3 different restaurants under the name Food Incorporated, a third-party advertiser can only accept 1 contribution from Food Incorporated and not 1 contribution from each restaurant, because each restaurant in Food Incorporated is owned by the same person. So you can only accept a contribution from 1 person at a time. Next slide, please. This slide lists the parties that a candidate or third-party advertiser cannot accept a contribution from. Another consideration is volunteers helping your campaign. The value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. However, if the volunteer is a professional, so for example, an accountant or a lawyer, and they volunteer to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and a campaign expense from you as the candidate. So for example, if you have a friend who's an accountant and they volunteer to keep your records for you, you have to list his or her time as a contribution. So if they usually charge $30 including tax per hour and they spent 5 hours on your campaign, you have to include $150 as a contribution from them and as an expense on your end. Even though you didn't pay him or her and they did it for you as a favor and you didn't exchange money, you still have to record it as if you did. If you encounter this situation during your campaign and you have any questions, again, feel free to contact myself or Diane at any time. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. Next slide, please. Campaign contributions are money, goods, services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. So you must keep the following campaign records: receipts issued for every contribution, including when you accepted the contribution and the date you issued the receipt. And remember to issue receipts to yourself for any contributions you make as well. The value of every contribution, whether it's in the form of money or goods or services, and the contributor's name and address, receipts obtained for each expense, any claim for payment of an expense that the campaign may dispute or refuse to pay. So even though you haven't paid this vendor because you don't agree with them, you still have to include that claim for payment. Funds raised and expenses incurred from each separate fundraising event or activity, the terms of any loan received from a bank or other recognized lending institution. So I encourage you to look at the financial forms now to get an idea of where you'll be recording this information. And if you're unsure or have any questions, it would be better to ask in advance. And again, you can ask your local clerk's office, you can ask us, you can ask a lawyer, an accountant, whoever you wish to. Fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Money raised by events at a fundraising campaign, like a raffle or by selling baked goods, also must be recorded as contributions. The contribution is the difference between the market value of the item and what you are selling it for. So for example, if I bought cookies for $1, but I'm selling them for $5 at my fundraising event, each person that bought a cookie contributed $4 to my campaign. Receipts must be issued for every contribution over $25 and should contain the name and address of the contributor and the amount and date. So instead of $5 cookies, if I sold t-shirts for $50 and I bought the t-shirt for $1, anyone who purchased a t-shirt would, one, be contributing $49 to my campaign, and payment would have to be given by check or money order. So I cannot accept cash because it's over $25, and I would have to issue a receipt and record the contributor's information. So it's very important that you keep these records accurate and safe. Diane will talk about compliance audits later in the presentation, but I'm just highlighting the importance of maintaining your financial records for your own security in case you do have to go through a compliance audit. When in doubt, just record the information and keep it safe. Next slide, please. The limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200. The individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. So for example, in one municipality, I can contribute up to $5,000 to various candidates, but I can only give one person up to $1,200. So how I reach that $5,000 is up to me. I could give one person $500, one person $200, one person $1,000, but the minute I reach $5,000, I have to stop. And again, remember, I can only give each person up to $1,200. So since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to inform your contributors verbally and just include the limits on the receipts you provide. So you might just want to ask them if they think they've reached their limit so that you're not accepting money from them that you're just going to have to return. You can't ask who they contributed to or even how much, but just clarify with them that they have not given you more than $1,200. And that means through buying cookies, through buying t-shirts, or through giving cash or checks. And also that they haven't spent over $5,000 in the municipal election as a whole. Next slide, please. Self-funding limits for municipal council candidates are based on the number of electors voting for the office, up to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. The formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council and $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for other council offices. So again, this formula is in the slide deck and in the candidate's guide, so you can refer back to it at any time. The financial slides that we're discussing now can seem confusing when you first hear them, but when you go back and read them by yourself, it will become more clear. And if not, you can always contact us with your questions. The highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is $25,000. If the formula works out to a number that is over $25,000, you're still capped at the $25,000 limit. There are no self-funding limits for school board candidates or third-party advertisers. Next slide, please. So if you decide to kickstart your campaign by self-funding it, you can only reclaim that amount if you have a surplus at the end of your campaign. So do not contribute to your campaign assuming that you will get that money back, because you may not. And that's regardless of if it was your own money or if you took a loan out. If you borrow money and get a loan from a bank, that loan is not considered campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. It's considered a self-contribution. Any interest that you do accumulate on that loan during your campaign can be considered a campaign expense. I will now pass it back to Diane to continue the campaign finance portion of the presentation, starting with campaign expenses.
There we go. Got the special little alert. Anyways, thank you very much, Sav. That was great. It is a lot of information. I do understand that you were probably very overwhelmed, and there's a lot more information to come. I can't say enough about the guides that we have prepared this year. They are fantastic. They provide a lot of information, a lot of examples, and I think if you focus on the guides first and then move to the financial forms, and then possibly look at the legislation, you're going to be in a good position for your campaign. This slide, campaign expenses, we're going to start moving in that direction. Candidates and third-party advertisers should become familiar with the campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf for his or her campaign, or by a third-party advertiser. The nomination filing fee is no longer an expense and is not included in the financial disclosure form. As Sav said, goods and services are a contribution. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses and must be reported. A receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only nominated persons and/or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during the campaign period. Payment of any campaign expenses must be drawn from the campaign account, and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. The other thing I should comment about a campaign account is you need to make sure that all of your monies go into the campaign account. We're going to talk a little bit later about that type of thing, but it's very important that if you take a loan, if you get money from a fundraiser, anything like that, you want to make sure the first thing that you do is put that money into the campaign account. All expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure forms to be filed with the clerk by the candidate or the third-party advertiser. I'm just going to give you a couple of tips and reminders throughout the presentation. So the first tip, often we're asked about how a candidate should treat a credit card purchase. And our comment to you is, first of all, it is not contemplated in the Municipal Elections Act. The Municipal Elections Act is a little behind on electronic funds. So we give you some guidelines. When making credit card purchases, you need to keep notes and clear records showing that the expense on the credit card was reimbursed from the campaign account. That's really important. The other tip or note that I want to give to you is talking a little bit about PayPal, GoFundMe, that type of a funding program that may have a platform that charges you a fee. Again, it's not contemplated in the Municipal Elections Act, so we're just providing you some guidelines or some things to keep in mind. So candidates are responsible for keeping records for each contribution. They should be able to demonstrate that they have complied with the campaign finance rules, and they should they be excuse me, let me try that again. That they complied with campaign finance rules should they be subject to a compliance audit. If any payments made via PayPal, checks, etc. are anonymous, the payment would be deemed ineligible and must be turned over to the clerk. Candidates will also need to ensure that all contributions are eligible. All contributions must come from individuals who reside in Ontario and not from a corporation or a trade union. You must be able to verify details required on a receipt. Another thing to keep in mind is that if an online platform takes a cut of the contribution, that is a campaign expense. So for example, if someone makes a $100 contribution and the candidate gets $98 out of that contribution, that is a $100 contribution and a $2 campaign expense, not a $98 contribution. Next slide, please. Campaign expenses continued. With respect to campaign inventory, if you ran in the last election and you want to use your leftover goods such as signs or office supplies, you must determine what the current market value for those goods is. And in other words, what would it cost if you purchased it today? These amounts are to be recorded as expenses. Conversely, if you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign and it becomes your personal property, but you want to store them to use them for another election, any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. I want to reinforce something with you related to volunteers. The value of services provided by volunteers generally not considered to be a contribution. So if you get your kids' friends, your neighbors, other people helping you put in signs or circulate some leaflets, that would be a volunteer contribution, and you don't need to put that into your financial form. However, if a professional who provides a service for which they would normally be paid the market value of that service, it must be recorded as a contribution by that professional volunteer and as a campaign expense, as if you spent money to purchase it. No money actually has to change hands, but you do need to do the finance information. Another tip, goods and services, and again, this is a bit reinforcing what we just said, but goods and services. So if somebody gives you a flower pot, or as Sav said, gives you, they're a baker and they give you muffins or donuts, is donated by a professional, a goods or service. This also needs to be reported first as a contribution. A receipt has to be issued, and then it has to be reported as an expense at market value. Next slide, please. Spending limits. The spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in an Ontario regulation. The clerk calculates the spending limit twice. Once, upon the candidate filing their nomination, the clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed September 15th, 2018, the previous election. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it exists on September 15th, 2022. Whichever is the higher number is your spending limit. Again, a little tip: self-spending limit, general spending limit, and expressions of appreciation or parties after voting day spending limit, these are all very different. So you just need to pay attention and know that there are different rules for each. Keep track of that. Next slide, please. As mentioned in the previous slide, the clerk will provide 2 spending limits, and this will also be provided to the third-party advertiser. The higher will be used, will be the final spending limit. If a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limits, and therefore financial filing must be kept separate. And I think Sab alluded to this earlier. The reason there are different spending limits across municipalities is because the spending limits are calculated both based on electors, and the number of electors in Kingston versus Toronto versus, a small municipality like the township of Brock in Durham, they're all different. And so that's why you get different spending limits. Often third-party advertisers will register in several municipalities, and they will contemplate a joint purchase in order to take advantage of bulk ordering. This is permitted, however, the joint purchase must be apportioned across each campaign financial filing. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. The contribution limits, spending limits, those types of things. Third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contributions and expenses are tracked and accounted for. Proper record retention is taken care of. Proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses or accepting contributions on behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. Next slide. This slide demonstrates expenses that are not subject to the limit. You will learn and you will see in the financial forms and in the guides, there are expenses that are subject to the spending limit and expenses that are not subject to the spending limit. It can get a little bit confusing, but I think if you use these slides, the guide, and the forms, you're going to be in a good position to understand those. Most expenses are subject to the limit. Those listed on the slide are not. Expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from campaign spending limits, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of funds as its primary purpose. Again, there is a section dedicated in the financial forms, Form 4, for fundraising functions. Campaign events which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. So let's say you were going to be having a barbecue, a community barbecue, and at that community barbecue, the focus was announcing your platform, and you had a little table off to the side where people could make donations, that or contributions. That is not a bona fide fundraising function. Similarly, a brochure promoting the awareness of the candidate that contains contact information to make contributions, that does not qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses, and I'm going to mix things up a little bit here for you, or further mix you up. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit, if incurred before voting day, are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. For example, goods and services. This does not permit you to play with your expenses. If a purchase was pre-election and the invoice and the goods, and the goods came in pre-election and the invoice came in post-election, you must use it as an expense subject to the limit. Next slide. Third-party advertising spending are similar to candidate spending limits. There is a general spending limit and a limit for expressions of appreciation in parties after voting day. And this will be provided to them by the municipal clerk. Just a little tip, candidates and third-party advertisers, when you're thinking about your expressions of appreciation and parties after voting day, I do want to share with you that you should be reasonable. There were examples in the last election and the previous election where two candidates were taken to compliance audits and then were taken forward for a legal case, and both of them did not pass muster and were fined a very large amount of money and were also penalized in other ways. So it is very important that instead of celebrating your wife's birthday at a really fancy golf course, and by the way, this is also my expression of appreciation to the tune of $46,000, that might not be reasonable. Next slide, please. Campaign finance rules. As a candidate or a third-party advertiser, it's important that you be fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. A question we're often asked is, are we required to have a chief financial officer? The answer is no. Federal and provincial campaigns are required to have chief financial officers. In a municipal campaign, you are your chief financial officer. You are the one who will be subject to scrutiny if you are called to a compliance audit and may pay the penalty if you are found to be in contravention of the act. So you can have people helping you with your finances, but ultimately you are the one who is responsible. I suggest again that you familiarize yourself with the financial sections of the Municipal Act and with the financial statement forms that we have a link for you at the back. This will help guide you to organize your records and how they need to be, according to how they need to be reported. You are required under the Municipal Election Act to keep accurate records, open a bank account if you're spending any money or accepting contributions. Again, a reminder, you do need to have a bank account if you are raising or spending money, including those who are self-funding their campaign. We often have folks who call us very close to the financial filing deadline, and we hear from them that they use their own personal accounts for their campaign. They thought because they were self-funding, they could do this, but in fact, self-funders do have to open a bank account also. Next slide, please. Campaign finance rules continued. Candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete records and accurate financial statements during the course of the campaign. And the reason we say during the course of the campaign is a lot goes on during your campaign. And if your record keeping is a little off or something happened to in your campaign and you realize that you probably are going to may have to justify it at some point, if you keep those tight financial or campaign records and tight information on all of the things that are happening in your campaign, you will be in a much better position if you are called to a compliance audit. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate in the prescribed forms. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all financial records until November 15th, 2026, when the new council takes office. That's a long time, so you better make some space in your basement. These rules apply whether you are elected or not. Contributions, campaign income, fundraising events, and spending limits are all treated differently. Make sure you read the guide and make sure you keep very accurate records throughout your campaign. Another tip, make sure you organize your records and your financial information in a manner that's easy to follow and find. This will help you remember, and it will be important if you are called to a compliance audit committee. And when I talk about that, I often say keep big tracks. If, for example, if you use a credit card, we're talking about making sure that we can see the statement from the credit card, that there's a canceled check from the campaign account, that we see the statement next time showing that it got paid off. All of those are big tracks, so that it'd be very easy for you to be able to explain what happened in your campaign. Next slide, please. Campaign finance rules. Store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. And I often say, not a grocery bag. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or his or her designate. And it's a good practice to have a receipt that is a multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially numbered. Open a bank account which provides monthly statements and canceled checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit, listing the name of the contributors and the amount received from each. Another tip is maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses and obtain invoices to support all payments from the fund. At any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the amount of the original petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by by using a campaign check to replenish it. Candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look at Form 4 for candidates, Form 8 for third-party advertisers, again, to guide the maintenance of their campaign fund finances. Requirements under the Municipal Elections Act require those records be kept November 15th, 2026, when the new council is sworn in. Another tip, and it's just a quick sentence: behave like you will be going to a compliance audit committee when it comes to your record keeping. That way, it's easy and simple for you to be able to answer questions. Next slide, please. Campaign advertising. Candidates and third-party advertisers cannot cause an election campaign advertisement to appear unless they provide the following information to the broadcaster or publisher, and that's listed on this slide. The period during which third-party advertisers can third-party advertisements can appear is May 1st, 2022 until close of voting on voting day, October 24th, 2022. Third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. Next slide, please. Campaign advertising continued. This slide is about record retention for the third-party advertisers and the broadcasters for which the advertising was purchased. And again, I'll just let you familiarize yourself if you are a third-party advertiser. Advertising about an issue rather than a candidate or a yes/no answer to a question on the ballot is not considered third-party advertising. For example, a sign that says support local business or keep the waterfront green would not be third-party advertising, even if a candidate has made this issue part of their campaign. Next slide. Financial statements. All candidates are required to file a Form 4 with the clerk regardless of how much or how little they spend to fundraise. If you file a nomination form, then you must file a Form 4. The form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or were acclaimed, and I think Sav was talking about that earlier. If you register as a third-party advertiser, you must complete a Form 8. A candidate and a third-party advertiser may resubmit their financial statement to correct an error up until the final filing deadline. If a candidate or a third-party advertiser feels that they will not meet their deadline, they may apply to the Superior Court of Justice for an extension prior to March 31st, 2023, and that is the final deadline I spoke of. Next slide, please. Financial statements continued. The appointment of an auditor by a candidate is mandatory if expenses or contributions or expenses and contributions exceed $10,000. So that's $10,000 and 1 penny. Then you need an audit. Auditors must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act, and I do suggest that if you think you're going to be in this position where you are going to need an audit, book your auditor earlier. Last election, we had a number of people who were in a very difficult position, knowing that their auditor was likely not going to get their audit completed. Again, be diligent, read the act, read the guides, read the financial forms, know your responsibility, and seek professional support if needed. Next slide, please. Financial statements continued. Candidates can file their documents at any time after voting day to January 3rd, adjusted from December 31st as it falls on a Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. That's the period of time in which you can raise and spend money. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expenses incur. If you are not sure that you are going to be spending or raising monies, hold off filing your financial statements until closer to the deadline. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligations and publish that report on the municipal website or in an electronic format. And I think Sav talked about this. Oh, sorry, she was talking about contribution limits. Sorry. Anyways, this is candidates. If candidates have not filed their papers, that will be reported, and it needs to be reported by April 30th of the new year. Financial statements. Next slide, please. Continued. Nomination filing fee is only refundable if the financial statement is filed on time. If a candidate or third-party advertiser feels that they will not meet the deadline, they may apply to the courts for an extension prior to the March 31st, 2023 deadline. If a candidate or third-party advertiser who misses the filing date, they may, within a 30-day grace period, provide a $500 late filing fee to the municipality and then submit their financial form. Note, a candidate who files within the 30-day grace period may be subject to both the late filing fee of $500 as well as the loss of their nomination refund. A candidate or third-party advertiser may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the financial deadline. And we did see this in the last campaign. In the last election, we saw people who were a little bit panicked because they'd made a submission, an invoice had come in late, and their campaign period had ended. So this is a new, I think it was available in the last election, but if you know that you've made an error, you do have an opportunity to fix it up until the deadline. Next slide, please. When filing the financial statement, a candidate or a third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount over to the clerk. Prior to paying over any surplus to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if an individual, made to the campaign, not to anyone else. The amount that may be refunded is the lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. So, for example, if my surplus was $100, I contributed $50 to my campaign. I can remove that $50. The remaining $50 must go to the municipal clerk. The clerk is required to place the surplus monies in trust for use by the candidate or third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. If neither the candidate or the third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it becomes the property of the municipality or the school board. Next slide, please. Compliance audits. I've been talking a little bit about making sure that you have big tracks and that your finance stuff is in organized manner. We'll talk about a little bit about the compliance audit, and you'll get a better understanding of why I'm reinforcing that. Every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. Members of a committee cannot be members of council, school board, an employee, a candidate, or a registered candidate in the election, or a third-party advertiser. The clerk is required to review contributions, and this is what Sav was referring to, contributions reported on candidates' financial forms and prepares a report for consideration by the Compliance Audit Committee. So you submit your financial forms, the clerk gets those, and they are required to review the contribution limits by your contributors. And if there is something that does not look proper, they will do a report and send that on to the Compliance Audit Committee. This process, and this is done if a contributor may have exceeded the limits. This process is not connected to the compliance audit process. If it's apparent to the clerk, a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee, which would meet to determine whether they're going to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify What details are provided in the report to the committee? An elector who is entitled to vote in an election may apply to a compliance audit committee even if the candidate has not filed their financial statements. The application an application to the Compliance Audit Committee must be made out in writing and sets out the electors' reasons why they believe the Municipal Elections Act has been contravened. Applications must be submitted to the clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of the filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee will consider the application and decide whether to retain an auditor to undertake a compliance audit of the candidate's financial return. Next slide, please. Compliance audit continued. What happens after somebody places or submits a complaint? The Compliance Audit Committee is required to review and provide brief written reasons for its decision. Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. The written reasons for the committee's decisions shall be given to the candidate, the clerk with whom the candidate filed his or her nominations, the secretary of the local board if applicable, and the applicant. If an audit occurs, the audit report must be circulated to the same individuals. The audit committee considers the auditor's report. If the compliance audit committee determines that there has been, if the compliance audit determines that there has been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to proceed to legal action. Decisions of the committee are or may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Elections Act may proceed with legal action without having first obtained a compliance audit. Next slide, please. This slide sets out the offenses constituting a corrupt practice. A corrupt practice is something very different than a complaint to the Compliance Audit Committee. It is a corrupt practice is a criminal offense, and it is usually handled by the special unit of the OPP. And we did see one of them last election up in Muskoka area. The person who they brought the complaint against was not found to be in breaking any of the corrupt practice rules, but it still was a very detailed investigation. They reached out to our office. It's an important matter to think about. Next slide. Penalties. This slide lists out some of the penalties that you could face as an individual, candidate, or third-party advertiser if you contravene the Municipal Elections Act. Next slide, please. Voters list. The preliminary list of electors, as corrected by the clerk, becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their name and their information corrected or added or removed from the voters list. The clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that the person has passed away. Next slide. Voters list continued. Candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the names of the electors entitled to vote for that office. The voters list shall never be posted in a public place. The voters list shall not be made available to the public by posting on an internet website or via any other print or electronic medium of mass communication. Third-party advertisers are not eligible for the voters list. Next slide. Voters list continued. As Anya made a comment on, the clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of this list to sign a receipt acknowledging that this list is only to be used for election purposes, and any other use would be a violation of the Municipal Elections Act. Next slide. Voting proxy. Eligible electors can appoint another person who is also an eligible elector to vote on their behalf. There are a number of reasons why someone would appoint someone else to vote on their behalf. It might include absence, they're leaving the country, illness. Again, there's lots of reasons. This is done through a proxy form. It is an official form which has to be certified by the clerk. The clerk can designate a place and time in which you can have this form submitted and certified. However, no appointments can be made until all nominations are closed. Eligible proxy voters can only exercise one proxy vote unless the proxy is acting on behalf of a spouse, sibling, parent, child, grandparent, or grandchild, in which case they can be a proxy for more than one. Municipalities using alternate voting, such as telephone or internet voting, may choose not to permit proxy voting. Next slide, please. Scrutineers. Candidates and not third-party advertisers may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Scrutineers may observe, but they are not allowed to interfere with voters, attempt to influence the vote, or ask a voter how they voted. In a traditional election where voting takes place in a poll, the DRO is in charge of the activity in the voting place. And the DRO may ask a scrutineer to leave if they are not complying with the legislation. Candidates and scrutineers should respect that DRO must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and the security of the vote. There are no age limits on scrutineers, but I would suggest that you want to choose somebody who is going to represent you well, who is going to know how the importance of a voting process and know the consequences if those are interfered with, because it is going to come back to reflect on you as the candidate. Next slide, recounts. A recount is automatic if a vote is tied. Councils and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for automatic recounts. Councils still retain the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of results. Next slide, please. This slide just shows some key dates for you that I'm going to take you through. Voting day is Monday, October 24th between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes or institutions, or a council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. The campaign period, the time in which the candidate can accept contributions and incur expenses, runs from the date the nomination is submitted until January 3rd, 2023. The campaign period for a third-party advertiser is the same, raising money, incurring expenses, begins on the date their registration is certified. The earliest date might be May 1st, 2022, until January 3rd, 2023. And the deadline for filing of campaign financial statements in the clerk's office is Friday, March 31st, 2023, no later than 2 p.m. And that's another little tip I want to mention to you. Pay attention to the times. People automatically assume that it is a business day. In fact, a lot of these deadlines end at 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file this statement regardless of how much they spend or receive in contributions. Next slide. This slide outlines for you a series of resources that we've pulled together, including legislation, a link to the guides that we were talking about, a link to the election forms, and to Municipal World. They have a number of books that are related to running for municipal office you may want to look at. And next slide. I'm going to turn this back to Sav.
Well, that concludes our That concludes our presentation today. So thank you again for your time and attention. I know we asked a lot from you, so we do appreciate it. And of course, as we've mentioned many times, we're available to answer any questions. Diane's contact information is listed there. And I guess we'll be taking questions now.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That was really insightful. A lot of really, really good information there. As mentioned at the beginning, we have questions that have come through in advance. We've got questions that have come through via email, and then ones from people that are attending in person or virtually through the webinar. So I'm going to be circulating through all of those. So I'll sort of facilitate the questions, and maybe what we'll do if we'll start with one that has come through our earlier email. So there was a question that came through regarding whether or not someone can run for council if they are related to somebody who is an employee of a municipality. So they themselves are not an employee, but somebody that they are related to is an employee of the municipality.
So I'll take that, Seth. Yeah, the Act does not speak to relatives. It is just pure employees. So I think that this person is fine.
Perfect. Great. And I will say, I think there are some components in the employee code of conduct at the City of Hamilton around relationships. And so the employee would also need to be aware of that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Perfect. There are no other questions that I'm actually seeing. I will open it up, and if anybody wants to, if anybody from the phone line or anybody who is attending has any questions, if you could let us know. I got a question from Bob Hurst. Bob, we're just going to unmute you.
Okay. Yeah, I think my emails that I sent through didn't go through again, but we'll have to figure that issue out separately. So there are a couple of different things I asked questions on, unrelated, but just came up at different times. One, in regards to the nomination fee, is there different payment methods that are available when we're coming in to file that nomination to pay the fee? Does it have to be in cash or by check, or how would that be paid? And then I'll ask my second question.
Perfect. I'm happy to take that one. So for the nomination fee, we are accepting cash, we're accepting debit, check, or a certified money order. We are not accepting credit.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates more to the campaign fundraising, I guess, in particular, for accepting money in a trackable manner. Would something like an e-transfer be acceptable to receive a payment? Because that does have the tracking on who specifically it came from, at least an email address. I don't know if that would be sufficient for a tracking method or not to receive payments that way for those who want to contribute to a campaign fund.
What you have to, again, I think we made comments related to pay. I'm just pulling them out again. Again, the Act does not speak to those types of things. You as a candidate need to be satisfied that it meets the receipting requirements and the information requirements of the Act. So I can just go through this tip again if that's something that you think might be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Yes, please.
Okay. Again, often we're asked how candidates should treat credit card purchases. When making credit card purchases, you need to keep notes and clear records showing that the expense on the credit card was reimbursed from a campaign account. That's not exactly what you were asking, but we'll go into the PayPal GoFundMe guidelines. Candidates are responsible for keeping complete records for each contribution. They should be able to demonstrate that they have complied with the campaign finance rules, so that if they are subject to a compliance audit, they can show that. If payments are made via PayPal, check, or other anonymous payments, these would be deemed ineligible and must be turned over to the clerk. candidates will need to ensure that all contributors are eligible. So if an e-transfer allows you to verify that, then that's one check. All contributions must come from individuals who reside in Ontario. If an e-transfer can tell you that, then that would be a check. And you also have to verify that it's not from a corporation or a trade union. And again, you have to be able to verify those things as well as the information that's required on a receipt. So you're going to have to do a little bit of homework, Bob. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. I have another question that came through the chat. Are we allowed to make materials available for businesses to download and distribute as they wish? It wouldn't cost the candidate money, but they're providing it for for businesses to distribute.
Sav, what I'm wondering about, is that a contribution from a corporation or a trade union kind of thing? Sorry, go ahead. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sorry, just some clarity. The candidate would be providing like a brochure or poster for businesses to print and post?
Yeah, so I think, it would be like a graphic, so a brochure or something that can be downloaded and distributed.
But it would be for their campaign, right?
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
I believe so.
No.
I'm wondering, Sav, if that's one we need to get back on. I am a little worried about the corporation piece.
No, I agree. I feel like it
Okay.
is spending money. Someone has to
Yeah.
spend money on the printer,
Yeah.
on the printer paper, on the ink. And as we've mentioned, you have to be registered to spend money either as a candidate or a third-party advertiser.
Anya, can you send that to us, and we will,
Yes.
how we will do this is get it back to you. I don't know if you're tracking your participants or whether there's a way in which you can share that information. Is that possible? Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. So just so everybody is aware, we are also compiling a frequently asked questions document. We're going to maintain the questions that have been asked during the session, and then additionally questions from candidates as we go through the process, and that will be all online. So that will be available. But Diane and Sav, I will directly send you this question and get back to the candidate or to the asker. They did provide a little bit of clarification here. So the clarification or the additional piece of information here is, what about the candidate providing the brochure materials to the business? So they're providing the brochures to the business. So the business is not spending the money, but the candidate is spending the money.
I mean, that's like advertising, right? It's
I know,
equivalent
like advertising.
to putting up a sign, but instead of a sign, you're
Yeah.
putting up posters.
Yeah. And I think what you have to, like, when we talk about signs in a window of a business, they can only have one sign, has to comply with sign rules. You have to make sure that, again, that, that you are following the rules of who can contribute to your campaign. And I'm kind of thinking that flyers, brochures that are distributed to the business, or, again, it's a clearer situation. But again, I would ask you to have a look back at the campaign rules, the contribution rules.
Okay, perfect. And again, I'll send that question back through for further consideration and response. All right. Any other questions? Oh, I see a hand.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we just want to clarify because it was a lot of information all at the same time. I can start fundraising once I file my nomination forms, but I can't start campaigning until the September 26th, correct? No. Okay.
No.
You can begin raising funds and campaigning as soon as you submit your nomination.
Okay. Perfect. Thank
Just
you.
to add to that, the September 26th date is with regard to election
Signs
sign
only?
bylaw. Yes.
Okay.
So that's the
Okay.
first day signs can go in the ground in the city of Hamilton.
Okay. So just another question too about e-transfers, because I know I'm like a lot of young people and they don't have checks and stuff like that. So for example, we were just looking at how e-transfers works. And if a person emails you, it has their full name, their actual bank, how much they sent you. That is a record, and then you could send them a receipt. Would that be considered a good record?
You have to be able to make sure that they are an eligible elector.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm hopefully only collecting money from people I know. So
And just remember, this all goes back to you. You are your CFO. You have
okay.
to make sure that you have what you need to comply.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much, ladies.
There was an additional question with regard to the signs and the sign bylaw, and it was asking whether that pertains to private property as well, the September 26th. It does. The only exception would be the candidate office. So you can have a sign at the candidate office prior to that date. And in addition, there are a couple of pieces around the vehicle signs, bumper stickers and such that you can have it before September. And then, other than that, I would refer to the sign bylaw for the specific details.
Okay. So is there
Any other questions? I am not seeing any other hands. It's the last chance. Oh, we just got one in. Can you unmute Stacy? All right, I'll pass it over to Stacy to ask the question.
Can a candidate use social media platforms to campaign? It's here. Sorry. Can a candidate use social media platforms to campaign?
Yep.
Yeah. And if they feel that there are eligible expenses that they need to claim associated with, whether it's the internet or whether it's, purchasing ads, then they need to do that. Yeah.
Okay. One more question coming through from Stacy.
Will this presentation be available after this meeting? And if so, where will it be available?
I'm happy to answer that question. Yes, it will be available. So it will be likely available tomorrow. We just have to upload it, get it on the website. So yes, it will be. The slides, the presentations today will be there as well. And it will be at the election website. So it's hamilton.ca/elections. You will find it there in the candidate information section. All right, any other questions? Okay, perfect. Well, with that then, I guess we will end a little bit earlier than expected. If there are any subsequent questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my elections team at elections@hamilton.ca. We will answer questions where we can, and where we can't, we will definitely connect with Diane and Sav to make sure that you have the information that you need. I just wanted to extend a thank you to Diane and Sav for attending tonight. Thank you so much. It was really great to hear from you and to have the information. And I just wanted to extend a special thanks to my elections team, who is here with me as well and has been so instrumental in getting tonight off the ground. So thank you very much, everybody. It's much appreciated. And I look forward to hearing from you all. So best of luck. And again, if you need any help, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everyone.